Hi, I'm Chris, and welcome back to my channel. Today I'm going to be delving into the details of gain staging. What is it? Why spend the time doing it? And how I would do it using both free and inexpensive plugins. As a disclaimer, I have no financial interest whatsoever in the two paid plugins I used during this video. I'm just a happy customer. I will never use an affiliate link on this channel because I value my independence, and I hope that you do too. The concept of gain staging started in the analog days. And in essence, it meant that when you're hooking up different pieces of equipment with signal flying between them, that the level is neither too high nor too low all through the chain, so that you don't either overload or clip the signal, nor have it so weak that when you turn up the gain later on that you have to compete with noise. You could be wondering, well, with a modern DAW, as long as your final output isn't clipping, it doesn't really matter what individual channels are doing, and you'd be partly right. So for me, why do gain stage for in-the-box work comes down to three things. Making sure that you've got enough headroom to work with, helping to mix at a consistent and not overly loud level, although mastering is a bit of a different story, and helping mixing decisions by starting all of the elements of a mix on a similar footing loudness-wise. So, I've set up a test mix for this, and I've done it by putting together a number of loops from sample packs. The only processing to these I've done so far is tempo and key matching. And given they are from different companies, they will have some sort of differences in how loud they are. The approach I'm about to show you is the same one that I'd use on any mix, even though I'm using samples and loops in this particular one. There are two parts to the way that I gain stage. The first part is gain staging each individual tracks and also any buses, and I'll show you two similar ways to go about individual track gain staging. For the first approach, you'll need a VU meter plugin that includes a gain trim. So for this, I'll use the excellent and free MV Meter by TB Pro Audio. Any plugins I talk about in this video, I've left a link in the description. So here we'll leave the reference level set at -18, and I'm going to click this little button so I can see both the left and the right channel on separate meters. So there's a reason for using a VU meter, and also for setting up the reference level at -18 dBs. The reason is that analog gear, outboard gear, is often designed to work at its best fed signal at that level, which also means that if you happen to like to use analog emulation plugins like, say, compressors or EQs or channel strips and so on, they also tend to be optimized for signal coming in at around about that level. Plus, I've also found that working at that level allows you to mix it at a comfortable level. And a secondary reason is that VU meters are more capturing the average signal level rather than, say, your DAW's meters, which are usually set to capture the peak sort of level. So it's a little bit more of a broader picture of what the loudness is doing. So let's start with the trumpet track. Since I haven't yet staged my mix bus or any tracks, I'll solo it so we don't blast everyone's ears out. Now, when you're doing this, you want to make sure you do it across the loudest part of the track, especially if your track is dynamic. In this particular case, the start of the track looks fine, so I simply start playback and watch the meter. So you want to be sitting so that the loudest it gets is about 0 on the meter. We can see that it gets to -5.6 on one side and -5.4 on the other. Let's try boosting the gain by 5.3 dB and see what happens. So now the highest peak is at -0.1, so that's right where we want it. The second way is using a plugin by Hornet called Meter Mk4. It's very affordable to start with, and given how frequently Hornet have sales, usually multiple times a week, You can often pick it up for around €2 or €3. Once again, we'll leave the settings, reference, maximum and target, all at default. So for this one, all we need to do is click the auto button and start playback. So as you can see, Meter Mk4 has done for us what we did manually on the TB Pro Audio plugin. It worked out how to adjust the gain so the highest peak is close to 0. So now in any subsequent playbacks, that 5.3 dB gain will be applied statically every time. If we want to recalculate for any reason, we can simply repeat the same process. Click auto on, play the louder section, get it to readjust. So that was a relatively quiet track that ended up being boosted to get it to the right loudness. Let's see what happens with the Horton plugin on a louder track, which is the more common scenario, at least what I've found. So the drum track looks to be quite loud, judging by the waveform. So I'll put MV meter first, followed by V Meter Mk4. So we can see what's going on. And then I'll set V Meter Mk4 to auto mode and start playback. That's taken it down by a substantial 12.3 dB. Looking at MV meter, we peaked at 10.4 dB over 0. Now you can see why I love using V Meter Mk4 for every mixed gain staging, as it's both really easy to use and I've got less chance of accidentally blasting my ears if I'm in the habit of using it every single time on every track. Speaking of mixers, the same principle applies for buses and folder tracks. I'll put an instance of V Meter Mk4 on the mix bus, one of the first things, and then as things change under it, I can always repeat the auto calibration again. Let's skip forward. I've put V meter on each track and run an auto calibration. So let's hear what the mix sounds like now altogether. So at this point, I'll start to balance the elements of the mix using faders and pan controls and so on, just generally balancing to start with. Since every element is starting at roughly the same level, it allows me to have the mindset of what needs to be turned down rather than trying to boost things that need to be louder. You also get a sense of, for example, if it's a hi-hat track, it usually needs to be turned down around about 12 dB, otherwise it's too loud. And so the more mixes that you do using this approach, the more efficient it is in future because you start to get a sense of where each track needs to be after you've gain staged it. So let's say I want to edit the drums and I want to do that via a channel strip. So I've already gain staged the drums with the VU meter, so this is what it sounds like just soloed. But I also want to do that in a way that doesn't give me a false impression, because it's the changes I'm making are louder or softer or so on. So I want to have it gain matched. And luckily there's a free plugin that can help me to do just that. Now, how I set it up is going to be slightly Reaper specific, but you can do the same sort of principle in whichever DAW you happen to be using. So the first thing I'm going to do is I'll add the plugin itself. This is called MAGC, or possibly Magic by Melder Production. The way that this works is it actually matches based on the sidechain setting. So you send in the original level via the sidechain, channels 3 and 4, and it then will match whatever's coming into it on channels 1 and 2 to that level, turning it up or down as necessary. So what I'll do is I'll add a Reaper channel mapper down mixer before Magic. So what this is going to do is I'm going to set it so that it copies the 1 and 2 inputs onto 3 and 4 as well. So it's exactly the same. So once I've done that, I need to make sure that Melder is listening on the right things. So 3 and 4 also need to come in on sidechain 1 and 2, because that's what it's actually using. So now if I play that, nothing different. And we can also listen to the sidechain version, which is going to sound exactly the same because we haven't done any processing yet. So now we add a channel strip. Move it to before Magic. I'm just going to bring up these windows a bit differently so we can see better. Okay, so we haven't done anything on the channel strip yet. So let's say, for example, I decide to add some tape drive. It also doesn't seem to do much, but that's because this plugin actually adjusts it for that. So let's do something different. What if I decided to add a compressor? So let's do 4:1 ratio and start turning up the threshold until it's doing something. As you can see, it's matching it's compensating for the gain reduction introduced by the compressor and turning it back up. So if we wanted to do an A/B, we could either disable the channel plugin, or alternately we can use the sidechain listen button on here. So let's say we wanted to boost our kick up a bit. So let's say about 63 Hertz, and as you can see, it's worked out the net gain difference with the compressor. So let's say I dialed back the compressor. Now that turns it down a little bit to compensate for the kick. So then let's say I'm happy with what I've done to the drums. So what I'll then do is I'll get rid of Magic, get rid of the down mixer, and I'll just run another instance of Hornet V emitter, and it's back to being gain staged at the usual sort of level. Now you understand my gain staging workflow, why you need 2 prongs as a strategy, and the best plugins I've found for doing the job. I'll be interested to hear about your thoughts or how you approach gain staging. Feel free to drop it in the comments below. Bye for now, and look forward to seeing you in the next video.